Chief took over for me.
That's funny.
Oh, sweet.
Uh-huh.
I didn't need to know that.
No. Okay, so someone's a little bit fussy. Got some feedback.
Yeah, do I hold it or?
It's probably the lavalier mic.
No, it's us.
It's you?
It's ours.
Okay, get them, It's because you're directly underneath that speaker. We worked really hard to,
But didn't do that during today's meeting.
it didn't, but maybe, you know, we could have cell phones and other interference now that we didn't have before that's, you know, more people. It's fine right now.
You ready to get going?
Oh. Nearly. Yes.
Evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Wilmington City Council regular meeting, January 20th, 2022 to order. May we have roll call, please?
Jonathan McKay,
Here.
Michael Snar,
Here.
Bill Learman,
Here.
Bob Osborne,
Here.
Michael Albright,
Here.
Nick Evelyn,
Here.
Matt Perky.
Here. Seeing everyone present, would you please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Real excited to have a sound system tonight. Is this working? Do you all hear me? Okay. Nick can hear me?
Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Well, don't thank me.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank several people, I believe. Under my agenda, we have the approval of the agenda. Any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agendas presented. Second.
A motion by McKay, second by Learman, to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is accepted. You also have before you the meeting minutes of the January 6th regular meeting. What is your pleasure?
Move to be accepted as presented.
Second.
Motion by Perky, second by Albright. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. Also, I have an announcement of a public hearing to be held February 17th, 2022 for a rezoning request from Health Source of Ohio for the rezoning of two parcels with a total area of 0.357 acres, more or less, more commonly known as 156.5 and 168 West Main Street, from DT Downtown Transition to DC Downtown Core. So we'll look forward to that. Last thing we have on the agenda is a presentation by the Clinton County Services for the Homeless, Clinton County Coordinated Community Plan. Tom Albanese and Denise Stryker. Tom is going to be talking with us digitally, and Denise is with us. So I turn it over to you guys.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Well, I first want to thank you for letting us join you tonight, and I also want to thank you for contributing to the important.
I don't know if it's working. Is it working?
Can everybody hear okay? Okay. You approved supporting the project of the coordinated community plan and strategic planning. And I think I want to start by also thanking you. It's because of the city of Wilmington that the Clinton County Homeless Shelter exists. I'm not sure how many of you might know the history, but the shelter opened back in November of 1988, and it was when Nick Evelyn was the mayor at that time. And city council, some of you might have been, I can't remember who all was on council at that time. I did not start working at the homeless shelter until 1994. But it's opened the doors on November 18th of 1988. And it was city council were meeting a night, much like tonight, when a young mother with 4 kids walked into council meeting. The father of the 4 children had went to jail. She had no job and had nowhere to live. And they'd been staying in a station wagon. And that's when city council said, we need to do something. So thank you for stepping up back that many years ago. Nick's and his team, Lynn Eichelberger and the team worked hard for many months and many years to get the shelter up and going. And I am grateful that we are now there celebrating, let's see, it'll be soon 34 years this year. So, but if not for the city council seeing the need and other local churches in the community and many concerned citizens that worked hard every day to get the shelter going. And we were the first rural area emergency shelter to open. And so I think that says a lot about our town, our community, and I'm much grateful for it. So I just want to kind of give an overview of how we came to working on the project that we just completed. And 2021 was a busy year. I'm happy to say that I've already seen the work of the project, the Coordinated Community Plan and the Clinton County Coalition on Homelessness, and how hard there are so many people working. I've seen the impact it's making already. Just the other day we had a gentleman who had heard about some of the work we were doing. He came into the shelter and he had stayed with us previously, and he was finding himself in a position to be homeless again, and he was struggling with a addiction and alcohol, and he knew he needed treatment. And he came and he said, I know your town's working on a lot of things, can you help me? And I can honestly say, the workshops and the work that the coalition's doing, our team knew exactly what to do and took the steps to get this gentleman into treatment. And so I'm seeing in a huge way what an impact this project is making in this town. We started back in early 2020. Taylor Stucker with Regional Planning, he started organizing a committee of some of you, some of our law enforcement, city and county officials, and other people from local organizations that we're also seeing the homeless crisis in this town and in our entire county. They met periodically throughout the year. We saw, the crisis, and we knew that we needed to do something. It was recognized very early in our discussions that we needed some data so that we would know exactly what steps we needed to move forward with. And in September of 2020, the community came together and worked on a point in time. A point in time is typically done in January. And the decision was made to do the point in time in warmer weather because it's much more likely that you will be able to find folks who are in hidden places that are experiencing homelessness when the weather isn't quite as bad. So we did, in the fall of 2020, we did a point in time, and we found that we have 125 people in Clinton County that were experiencing homelessness or living in very substandard conditions. 21 of those people, or I'm sorry, 22 of those people were sheltered, and the 103 of them were unsheltered. We seek funding to be able to hire a professional consultant to help us come out, do a coordinated community plan and strategic planning. And we're grateful for the support from the city. The Legacy Fund and Health First Fund also assisted each with a third of the project. The funding that we've secured, we were able to hire Tom Albanese. Tom's a professional consultant and a licensed social worker with 30 years of experience in the field of homelessness prevention and assistance. We started back in January of 2021, and the Clinton County Coalition on Homelessness was formed, and we have been meeting quarterly ever since January of 2021. Beginning in January, Tom began working and led our community to the important work of developing a coordinated community plan to address homelessness and housing instability. We have over 70 members who are part of the coalition, and the steering committee meets bi-monthly or as needed, sometimes more regularly. In 2021, the coalition approved the coordinated plan to prevent and end homelessness in Clinton County at their October 21 quarterly meeting. The work groups have already begun, and the coalition committee members are participating in 4 work groups, and they include the service and resources, temporary housing, rehousing, and prevention. So again, I just want to thank you. One of the things that the plan has determined is that there is a real need for rehousing, a full-time employee, 3 full-time equivalent employees, and that's something that I will be putting, doing some advocacy to find more funding for being able to do that. As Tom's contract comes to an end, or as he phases out and is doing less on the project, we will take the admin role at the Clinton County Homeless Shelter, so we will also be putting a request for funding to be able to continue this important work. We will be happy to keep it going, and we are going to work hard to make this project continue on for many years so that we can help those who are experiencing a crisis. Thank you so much, and I would like to introduce Tom now. Thank you, Tom. It's good to see you again.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Denise, so much for that introduction. I'm sorry I can't be with everyone there in person. I enjoy coming to Clinton County. It's just given the conditions, as we all are familiar, it was not something I was able to manage. But I appreciate you accommodating me virtually. I'm going to be very brief because I realize we have just a short amount of time on the agenda, and I want to respect everyone's evening hours here. I've got, it seems like a long PowerPoint. I believe everybody has it. I'm not going to go through everything in fine detail. I assume folks will just take a look as you're able. We also shared with you the final coordinated community plan. As Denise mentioned, we spent the last year building this plan, and I want to give you just a kind of high-level overview of the plan itself, some of the needs assessment findings, some of the key things, just so you're aware to highlight, and then I want to share just briefly some of the strategic actions that the coalition is working on. So first, I just want to acknowledge that we've got, I know you're not going to be able to see my screen that well, but I hope you can have a handout. But we have a very active membership group and a very active steering committee. I want to acknowledge Council Member Snarf, for his active leadership on the steering committee and direct involvement. In fact, he and the students at Wilmington College played a direct role in helping with the needs assessment and some of the background research that we did around rural homelessness and solutions to rural homelessness. So it could not have been done without Councilmember Snar's support and the support of Wilmington students and many others. You can see here our steering committee comprised of folks from different areas of the county. I want to acknowledge Pastor Joel Richter, from Faith Lutheran Church. I'm not sure if Joel's with us tonight. Joel's our chairperson and has really led the charge spiritually and otherwise, and also had a direct hand in helping with some of the needs assessment. We are following a model that was established about 7-8 years ago by the federal U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness around defining what it means to effectively address and prevent homelessness. There's sort of an operational definition that has emerged nationally, and that was picked up initially in national efforts that I was proud to be a part of around ending veteran homelessness. And between 2010 and 2017, veteran homelessness was cut in half nationally by virtue of federal funding for housing assistance, short-term rehousing assistance, other supports for our veterans to make sure we don't leave veterans on the street in our country. And I was proud to be a part of that effort. That's what our model here in Clinton County is informed by, and other national efforts to ensure that homelessness is prevented whenever possible, and when it does occur, it's rare, brief, and one time. And so it's about creating a full-fledged, optimized response to make sure our friends and neighbors don't experience homelessness, and if they do, we are ready and we're able to immediately rehouse folks as quickly as possible and get them back into stable housing. So this is just a high-level overview of the activities we took over the last year. We won't go into the details. Denise kind of gave you a thumbnail sketch of what we did. There was quite a lot of work, not just by me, but really many members of the coalition had a hand in developing this plan. And what we aimed to do was build a strategic framework, a foundation upon which we can continue to develop new strategies, new actions as we go. So we worked on a vision, we worked on a mission statement, we worked on guiding principles, and finally we developed a set of strategies and key actions around those 4 areas Denise outlined: prevention, temporary housing, rehousing, and service and resource supports. And we came up with this vision statement, which really embodies sort of the aspirational state that we are always going to be working toward. It really is aspirational, which is that all people live in stable housing with the resources they need to thrive and achieve an optimal level of independence. This is what we all wish for ourselves, our family, and our neighbors. We developed a mission statement that reflects how we'll go about achieving that mission every day, which is to develop and sustain a systematic response that ensures homelessness is prevented whenever possible, or if it can't be prevented, it's rare and brief. This is what we want to create: a systematic response across our various partners, led by the Services for the Homeless, but also including Hope House, Sugar Tree, and Our Father's Kitchen, and many other partners, Halbert House, Brightview, so forth, in our community that can help band together and help people facing a housing crisis. We set up guiding principles. I won't go through these. Please just take a moment and look at these when you can. But this really reflects our core values, the things that we hold close as we work to help people in a housing crisis, recognizing the dignity of everybody, the fundamental need for safe, stable housing, both for individuals and families, but also for the community, because lack of stable housing affects everyone. And that's really reflected here in our principles, and the fact that we want to follow evidence-based practices. We know what works. What works is making sure people, no matter their current state, have access to safe housing as a foundation for well-being. It's what Maslow taught us in 1942 with the hierarchy of needs. the same concept. People just, there's mounds of empirical evidence that show people will do better if they're in safe and stable housing, and our guiding principles reflect that. This is our kind of a more bird's eye view, if you will, of the type of responses we want to make sure are fully built out and available in Clinton County. And that is making sure we have ready access to prevention assistance to help people facing a crisis, and ideally prevent it and immediately help people stabilize and connect the community resources so that crisis is resolved rapidly. If we can't immediately prevent homelessness from happening, we want to make sure no one is on the street for want of a shelter bed in the county, and that we're immediately able to offer people the right amount of rehousing assistance so they can move out of shelter quickly and back into stable housing and move on in their lives and recover or whatever they may need to work on in addition to their housing. This is the system we aspire to build. We conducted, as I mentioned, a pretty thorough needs assessment given the time we had. We conducted a lot of interviews. Michael and I went out to camps, and we had some of the students go out to Our Father's Kitchen. I interviewed folks in the shelter. We interviewed some folks at Hope House, and we learned a lot. I learned something every time I talk with folks experiencing a housing crisis, and I've been doing this a long time. But we also had some focus groups with our faith community and also with providers around families and youth, and we looked at data. We looked at the data that we had, as well as evidence-based and best practices. I'm not going to read you the story about Jane. We just don't have the time tonight, but I would like to ask you to take a moment, maybe later tonight or tomorrow, and read the story about Jane, not her real name, and the story about Pete that we have in the PowerPoint. These are real people, our neighbors and friends in Clinton County who we interviewed, we talked with, who are experiencing a housing crisis. It kind of chokes me up when I think about Jane, when I spoke with her and her situation. Jane lives out in a campground in a mobile home that is not fit for habitation. By every federal definition, she is unsheltered. She had her children removed because of that, and she is struggling, as you can see in her story. I won't go into more detail, but please take a moment. Jane's situation is solvable. It is solvable. It is not intractable. We can solve it, and it's in everyone's interest that we do that. And frankly, just bottom line, it's more cost effective to help Jane solve her housing issues, help her get on her feet, move on, get her kids back, get a job, move on in her life, than not helping Jane. So we learned a lot about, we started with prevention, we looked at some housing conditions. As you can see here, in order to afford fair market rent, FMR, in Clinton County, a full-time worker has to earn just shy of $12 an hour to afford a one-bedroom apartment. This is an average rent. Of course, there's a range, but in general, you have to earn more than minimum wage to just afford and be able to sustain housing financially per now well-recognized ratios of income to rent. So that means that we've got a lot of folks in 1 out of 10 households in Clinton County are paying more than 50% of their income for rent. They are by definition at risk of housing loss. One medical bill, one lost shift, small things can set people behind and set them out of housing. We have resources. They're not as well utilized as they can be. They're not, sometimes people don't know about the resources, but they don't have the means to get to them. So we've got some areas that we identified to work on to help improve and optimize the resources we have to prevent homelessness to begin with. When we look at the number of people experiencing homelessness, as Denise mentioned, there was a point-in-time count in September, a very well done point-in-time count, by the way, that Denise and the crew at the shelter led, but what many people were involved in, identified about 120 plus people in shelter or unsheltered on that one night in September 2020. But we built out sort of an analysis that looked at how many people are homeless over the course of a year. This is a good way to start thinking about how much shelter do we need, how much rehousing assistance do we need. at capacity, if you will. People don't stay in shelter forever. They turn over. Typically every, month to 3 months, you've got folks sort of moving on. Sometimes people can't move on and they need more. But we estimate that in Clinton County, about 475 individuals, 372 households are going to be literally homeless over the course of a year. That means we have to have a response and a system ready to serve that many people. When we look at our capacity today, I was frankly, kind of surprised and assured that, and as Denise said, Clinton County is actually well ahead of the curve in terms of stepping up early and helping people have access to shelter. Sugar Trees come along and also provides emergency shelters, I think you all know. And we also have Hope House. We have about 70 shelter beds on any given night. Now, there's a caveat because during the pandemic, capacity had to be reduced to keep people distanced. But generally, when we emerged from the pandemic, we've got a fairly solid capacity. So our conclusion was we don't necessarily need more emergency shelter. As Denise said, we need more rehousing assistance so people don't stay in shelter longer than they have to, and we can turn over those beds. It's all about sort of efficiency, if you will. And so the more rehousing assistance we have, we do not have enough today. The faster people can exit, the more readily available those beds are for people who need it. But we do feel that there are some things to work on around improving access to temporary shelter, particularly for people outside of Wilmington, say in Sabina or Blanchester, who may not have the means to get into Wilmington to access a shelter bed, particularly during a crisis. But you can see there a quick summary. We looked at shelter data from Services for the Homeless. They have very good data because they're required for their state and federal funding to collect data, report it up to the state. I took a look at it with Denise and her crew, and we were able to tease out some things that were, I think, pretty enlightening. First, and this is in calendar 2019, we want to look before pre-pandemic, if you will, to get a better baseline. And we looked at the shelter numbers, saw that 250 plus individuals were served just at Services for the Homeless, not counting Sugar Tree, not counting Hope House, in 2019. Of course, those programs are just coming along. We also saw that most people coming into shelter were not coming from their own apartment. And this is important to highlight. Most people who experience literal homelessness and need an emergency accommodation aren't being evicted from their own apartment because just like many of us, people go to friends and family next. We all try to use our resources. The last thing any of us want to do is go to an emergency shelter. And that's true for people who are lower income, who may not have the means to go pay for a hotel for a while, let's say. They exhaust their resources. And about half of adults who come into the shelter have no income at all. They are struggling. Only about a third of adults are employed at entry, but at the same time, a third of adults have one or more severe and persistent disabling conditions. About 1 out of 3, just shy of 1 out of 3 adults are severely disabled coming into shelter. So we'll just sit with that for a moment. We're talking about folks who have lots of barriers, right? Not the least of which is their ability to pay for housing. And they're struggling with maybe a mental health issue, a physical disability, maybe a drug or alcohol issue, which compounds their problems and causes them to have that much more difficulty maintaining housing and all the things that are necessary to do that. Many people exit successfully, however, to stable housing or quote-unquote permanent housing. However, a good number of people do exit to family and friends and are, by definition, still somewhat unstable or precariously housed. They might have to leave at some point. So we have more work to do there. Just kind of quickly moving through this. We did identify, as Denise said, that we estimate that we need another 3 full-time positions to help people staying at the shelter, staying at Sugar Tree, staying at Hope House, staying in a campground, unable to figure out how to get out of dilapidated trailer with a tarp on top and get into more safe, decent housing. We need more staff, and there's a model for rehousing assistance called rapid rehousing. I won't get into the details, but it's a well-established model for helping people find housing, pay for housing, and stay in housing. There's also a well-established model called permanent supportive housing for people who are long-term homeless, just cycling in and out, who have a severe, persistent, disabling condition. We don't have enough permanent supportive housing either. We only have about 10 units, and they're not even in county. They're through Fayette Community Action Council that people can access, but they have to move out of county to get permanent supportive housing, which is an ongoing subsidy and ongoing services, just simply put. So we've got a big gap there to work on. And then finally, in service and resource supports, we identified a number of issues, not surprising, I think, to anyone. There's a need for more transportation assistance, a need for better access to affordable child care, and just service coordination issues that people struggle with as they're unhoused and may not have a car and don't really have the wherewithal to navigate themselves to recovery services or workforce and training services or child care services and whatnot. So we know there's a need there for individualized help. I'm not going to read these quotes to you. I wanted to get this in front of you. These are real words from our friends and neighbors that we interviewed. I selectively pulled some quotes because I thought this was a good way to illustrate how some people simply find themselves in a hole and they can't get out. There's a military veteran we talked with. He said, everything is closed to us during the day. Don't put us outside. We're all people. This is a former Marine who served in Vietnam and has been homeless for 10 years. Just to give you an example, these are tough situations and people are struggling, and I wanted to get their voices in here in front of you. And then there's a story about Pete, a young man staying at the shelter who suffered from severe depression, had to be hospitalized, no support, his family is not functional and not a source of support for him, ended up in the shelter, but also very motivated, remarkable. I mean, I don't know that I could handle it as well as he did, but very motivated, but struggling. Pete needs more help than he's getting when I talk to him. And he's got lots of opportunity. But I want to just move on very, very briefly just to cap off the strategic action plan. I won't go through all this. You can see, again, we've organized around these four kind of functional areas: prevention, temporary shelter, temporary housing, rehousing assistance, service and resource supports, as a way to focus our efforts. And these four work groups are now meeting regularly. We're working on a set of strategic actions that each work group has developed. It's not everything we can do, but it's what we feel is most important and practical to do in the near term. The strategic action plan we've set up as part of Homeward, of our new coordinated plan, is designed to be updated periodically. It's not a fixed thing. So as I mentioned, we create a foundation, a vision, a mission, guiding principles. Those are going to be our touchstones. We won't need to revisit those that often. But our strategic actions, we're going to revisit at least once a year, once every other year. But we're already rolling. These committees are already working on every one of these actions. As you can see here, again, I won't go into the details of it because I know we're a little tight on time. But I wanted to sort of share with you all the great work that the 70+ members are now engaged in, and really thanks to you. So I want to thank you for that, and just conclude my remarks and open it up for any questions. And Council Member Snar, I would invite you to weigh in with any reflections you have, because you were very instrumental.
Thank you, Tom. And Michael, do you want to lead off? Or does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I'll just say real briefly, echo everything Tom has said. One thing that's been nice about being part of this is to see that Wilmington's doing pretty well. We're ahead of many localities, and it's, that's not something I would know, not having comparison ability, and Tom has really shared some of that with us. So it's been really nice to know that Wilmington's done a great job, and I think this is a great step toward continuing it. And it's also heartening to see so many different actors come together and cooperate. So it's been a great process, and I commend Tom and Denise and all the folks involved.
Does anyone have pertinent questions for Tom or Denise or Michael?
I do have something. Yesterday, I went up and heard this presentation of the commissioners, and a question that was asked was about the veterans. And it was discussed at length and how well we do. We have 7 homeless veterans on average in Clinton County. And we have a lot of good resources for them to go to. And that was a testament to our county, but that was brought up and talked about a great deal. And Tom, you did an excellent job tonight and yesterday, and thank you for all the work that you've done on this project, along with all of our community members.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Michael, did you want to,
Yeah, I was, in talking with the administration, they were wondering if council would give a motion of support to Tom and the work of the Clinton County Coalition for Homelessness. Is that something council would support?
so do you want to make a
Okay,
motion then? Michael?
I make a motion for council to give a motion of support for the CCCH. Is that right? Is that good enough?
Sure, and to move forward with their work.
Yeah, yeah.
Second.
That is motion by Michael, second by Matt, is that correct?
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so carry on, guys, and thank you very much for your report. I know it was hard to make it smaller, but we appreciate that. Thanks so much. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, take care now.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks,
So
Denise.
thank you.
For everything you do.
City, I really appreciate each of you.
All righty. That's all I have under my portion. Mayor Stanforth is not with us tonight. Assuming that there's no report from the mayor's office. Yes,
Are we going to have a state of the city this year?
I have heard that we are, and
It'll be at the next meeting.
the next meeting.
Thank you.
Auditor Vance.
Nothing tonight, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Safety Service Director, Mr. Scheidegger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have 2 pieces of legislation tonight. The first one is a resolution authorizing myself to submit an application. This is for the Transportation Alternatives Program, also known as the TAP program, through the Ohio Department of Transportation for a multi-use pedestrian path along David's Drive. This is just a piece of that puzzle. As all of you know, you hear all these complaints about David's Drive. Believe me, I hear it as well. We're trying to get all these grant dollars. Part of that project, we want to build that multi-use path on Davis Drive as well. This is a great program because what we're asking for is approximately 1.1 million, and the grant would be about 1.04 million. So it's about a 95% match if we're successful. This just simply allows us the opportunity to apply for that. To do that multi-path trail on the Davis Drive project. I could talk about Davis Drive on and on and on. Most of you have heard this before. Right now we're tackling this in phases. We've already secured $2 million in grants for Davis Drive Phase 1, which gets us about a third of the way there. We've received, we've secured a little over $660,000 an OPWC grant. We've also secured a little over $1 million in OPWC loan money at 0% interest. But we're still a long ways away from the whole project. We've discussed this with the auditor's office and stuff on what are we going to do about phases 2 and 3. Do we continue to try to get these grants and secure it? Or is it something that we really need to seriously consider bonding? Not bonding, but doing notes. Bonding's a bad word. Doing notes or something like that. It's something that we are spending time analyzing that. But the multi-use path is part of this project, and if it's $1 million that the state government is it's available, I'd like to have the opportunity to at least apply for that. So, do you guys have any questions? Does anyone have any questions about that?
Would this be a part of the project if the grant doesn't come through? I mean,
The
would
multi-use path?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
because this is about, I'm ballparking without a calculator, 80 grand
This is
of
of our
70 grand of our money.
of our money if we're successful. Yeah. If we're not successful, it's something I would really want to talk about. But that's a good question because you would like to see the multi-use path.
Sure.
But is it the best use of our general fund dollars? And that's something that obviously you all we'd have to talk about at a later date.
I know that project is so fraught with budget concern that it's going to always be an issue with the money, and is $70,000 even worth the path? I would think so.
Oh,
but,
yeah, if you're gonna get $1 million,
but if we're strapped that much for that project, I think yes, I agree that I would think you want 95% of the path paid for, but
or at least the opportunity
to get that
to
funding.
get it, yes. So that's what I'm asking for. Yeah, I know in the legislation it says that we will obligate the funds and stuff like that, but of course, you're just authorizing. We can always come back and talk about it later, but at least give us the opportunity to apply for it and see what happens. So
Sure.
that would be my position on this. It's a huge project.
This pathway would be the full length of David's Drive, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
And Brian, when would you anticipate if we were to get it, it starting?
It's what, Rick?
Only to Lynn Lane.
To Lynn Lane, right? Yeah.
To Lynn Lane.
Oh,
All the way. And then
So it's from, help me out, right?
from 134 to Lynn
To
Lane.
To Lynn Lane,
And
yes.
down into what they go along there.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you're here, thank you.
I'm still unclear. The path that you're applying for is for the 1/3 that we're already funded for, or is this for the full length of the
The
project?
path is not funded. The path, the trail, the multi-use path is not funded. So if we wanted to put that in, it would be 100% city dollars. That's why we're trying to get more money we're trying to get grants to put the path in as part of that project.
For the entire project, or just the 1/3?
For the path, right now, it's to Lynn Lane.
It's what?
To Lynn Lane,
The new road.
the new road.
Yeah, I'm
Did you
going
say
to talk.
Yeah, from Rombach to Lynn Lane.
134 to Lynn Lane.
Okay.
They build a path as part of Williams Farm.
Right now, we do not have funding for a path. So we're trying, as part of any of the phases, we're trying to get phase one, we're trying to get the multi-use path for phase one funding for a multi-use path.
That's what
And it's just simply applying for it, and there's no guarantees that we would even get it. This is something we've already done before, and we didn't get it last year. We applied, we tried, we didn't get it. So we're gonna try again.
Brian, if we get it, when would it? No. I've got a speaker right above me, it's very strange. When would you anticipate it starting if we were to get the grant?
So the construction is spring of '23, right?
Right.
Spring of '23, so,
Spring of '23.
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do you have a motion for the first reading?
I'll make a motion to move first reading resolution 2204.
Second?
Have a motion by McKay, second by Snar. First reading resolution 2204. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? May we have the first reading, please?
A resolution authorizing the service director to submit an application to the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, through Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for a multi-use pedestrian path along Davis Drive and declaring an emergency.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and regulations, give second, third reading by title only.
Second?
Motion second for suspension of the rules. May we have roll call, please?
McKay?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Osborne?
Yes.
Albright?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Motion carries. May we have second, third reading, please?
A resolution authorizing the service director to submit an application to the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, through Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for a multi-use pedestrian path along Davis Drive and declaring an emergency.
Move for passage.
Second?
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Snar?
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Albright,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
McKay.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2204 passes.
All right, my second piece of legislation is something pretty routine. As you know, we sell surplus property on gov deals. This is declaring surplus property. We have 4 caravans from the transit department that we'd like to sell on gov deals. 2016 Dodge Caravans. So it has to go through council. Any questions on that?
Now, when I was looking it over, I was like, these are only 6 years old. But then I realized it came from Transit, and I was like, oh, they're spent.
Yeah, I think they're about close to 200,000 miles.
Yeah,
anyways. So
okay.
they're- Yeah.
Okay, no other questions? Can we have a motion for first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perky, second by Learman. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading, please.
A resolution declaring surplus property to wit, transit department vehicles valued at more than $1,000 and authorizing the sale of said property.
Move to suspend the rules and regulations, give resolution 2205, second and third reading by title only.
Second.
Motion second for suspension of the rules. Roll call, please.
Learman,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Albright,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Snar.
Yes.
Motion carries. May we have a second and third reading, please?
A resolution declaring surplus property to wit, transit department vehicles valued at more than $1,000 and authorizing the sale of said property.
Move to pass the resolution as read.
Second.
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Osborne,
Yes.
Albright,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Learman.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2205 passes.
That's all the legislation I have, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving into council committee reports, City Revitalization Committee, Mr. McKay.
We have no official legislation tonight, but we've got some things cooking, and there'll be more coming down the pipe. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. City Services Committee, Mr. Evelyn.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're still also looking for a date for our committee meeting. As soon as that's established, we'll have a very full agenda for the meeting. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Finance Committee, Mr. Albright.
No financial items, Mr. President, so no report.
Thank you. Judiciary Committee, Mr. Perky.
Thank you, Mr. President. No actionable items this evening, but we did have our committee meeting tonight. Kind of kick-started the committee for this year. We will have some things coming down the pipe here soon, so nothing further for this evening.
Thank you. Public Works Enterprise Committee, Mr. Snar.
Yes, we need to, we're asking for a first reading of the bulk water purchasing. Basically, we need to bump up fees for bulk water to cover current and future costs and anticipated maintenance and improvements. My understanding is this was done in 2017, the same way. I don't know if you want to add to that, Ray?
Right, so basically, this increase is the same proportional increase that we approved for our customers. And so it's more about fairness, and if everybody else is paying more, the people that use the bulk water station should pay proportionally more. And so so we did, we had 3 years increases on the regular rate. So this combines those 3 increases into one, just to keep it simple, keep it round, and only do it once. So, it's not, last year, we took in $44,000 on bulk water. So that's less than 1% of our overall revenue. And this will only increase to like $5,000. So it's really not about the money, it's more about fairness. I mean, the money there's maintenance that we have to pay for. We're paying out for the new dispensing our equipment. So it'll go towards that, but So that's the background. Does that make sense?
Sometimes, when contractors building a new building, they'll use a temporary meter on a fire.
Right, and
Would that
that's,
be separate from this?
the ordinance says this rate applies to that.
This rate does apply to a temporary meter?
Right, yes.
Any other questions? Okay, then. I move to give first reading only on ordinance 2202 by title only.
Second.
Motion second for first reading, ordinance 2202. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading, please.
An ordinance amending section 99.06 bulk water purchasing of the codified ordinances.
Is that all you have, Mr. Knight?
No, just one bit of good news that Rick passed along, so old timers, meaning those who've been on council a long time, may know that the new wastewater treatment plant is built on a brownfield, and that there was some concern about there being some contamination. And so apparently we just found out that we're not above limits, so we're in good shape as far as we can tell. So that could have been bad news, but it's good news. So just want to pass that along. That's all I have.
Thank you. And you want to set the second, third reading for the next council meeting?
That makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes council committee reports. We do have an auditor treasurer's report and the municipal court report. What is your pleasure?
Move to be accepted as presented.
Second.
Motion second to accept the reports as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Who was the second?
I was.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
So those are accepted. Now open the meeting to the public. Anyone that wishes to address council, please come forward. State your name and address. Any takers? All right. Anyone else have any comments for council?
Mr. President, I'd like to just take a second to commend our clerk on the thoroughness and accuracy of the minutes she's been preparing. It's a very good job that they're doing. I appreciate it very much.
I'll second that. Okay, and hearing nothing else, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion by Larry. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.
What's up?
Turn off your recorder.
I want to try it. I don't want to try it.
Yeah, I know.
When do you work tomorrow?
It's tomorrow Friday. I'll be there for